Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way to 2022 and review them. And next episode is The Abominable Snowman, an episode that I actually really like, but there are a couple of elephants in the room that I feel like must be addressed before we go any further. So first and most obvious one, it's a missing episode. It's a 6-part serial, but only episode 2 of the serial still remains and hasn't really been found. There is a relatively new animated reconstruction of the episode. Unfortunately, I was unable to find it. It's not on BrickBox and it's not on the usual places that I usually find, so I had to resort to watching the regular reconstruction of the static image and the random boards at the bottom. Now that being said, another major issue that this episode suffers from, and it's an issue that so many other Doctor Who episodes, especially in the classic series, suffer from: the racism. And yeah, some of the characters have been portrayed as racist Asian stereotypes, which is wrong. And it was wrong back then. Even though they weren't aware of it at the time, it was wrong back then, they just didn't want to admit it, and it's still wrong today. But you know what? I'm not really here to debate the ethics of what people did on television back in the 60s. I'm just here to watch and review the episode as it is, as the story presented before me. And really that's all I can allow myself to do at this point. Now, as I said, it's a really good episode. It's not a great episode like the previous one that I talked about, Tomb of the Cybermen, but there are really some great moments in here. First of all, this sets up the character of Professor Travers. Sorry, my bad. I like this character a lot for reasons that we'll get to as we go along with this season review. But first of all, side note, he's played by Jack Wadling, who is Deborah Watling's father. So this really was a father-daughter duo acting alongside one another in this episode, and another episode we will talk about eventually. But first of all, I really like that. I like the you can tell that they have really good chemistry with each other because they're literally father and daughter off camera. And speaking of having good chemistry, I love the progression of Jamie and Victoria together, and Jamie continued to play the overprotective older brother to Victoria, even taking a sword and trying to defend her against the Yeti with the sword, ultimately proving to be pretty futile, but whatever. So I like that Jamie is now falling squarely into that older brother persona, which he will continue to play all throughout the remainder of his time with the Doctor, which oddly enough equates to the rest of the Second Doctor's era on television, that is. So that's really great. I love to see that. Again, the monastery itself, if you again ignore all the racist and inappropriate things in it, I like the design of the monastery. I like the costume design, minus the design for Padma Ambava, which is really just, it's horrifying to look at, or not really the reasons that they intended it to be. But the costume design itself looks really great, and I like the monk characters in the episode in question. Now, obviously, we're not really here to talk about the monks, we're not here to talk about the monastery, and we're not even here to talk about Professor Travers just yet. The main highlight of this episode is, of course, the Yeti, making its Doctor Who debut in this episode, obviously going on to become a much larger figure in Doctor Who mythology going forward, but this is really their introduction, and as an introduction to a brand new monster, I think they nailed it out of the park. This, again, it starts off the episode by giving you the title, The Abominable Snowman, and boy oh boy, that Yeti looks scary and menacing, and yet somehow at the same time, fluffy and cuddly. So, it's part of what I always say about the best Doctor Who monsters, is that they strike a balance between goofy and terrifying. One of the main reasons why the Daleks work so well is because of that balance. And the Yeti can look pretty approachable, but also very intimidating which is why it works so well as a great Doctor Who monster. And obviously with the Yeti comes the Great Intelligence, also making its debut in this season. Now, certain things that happened with the Great Intelligence in the modern series aside, we will get to those begrudgingly when eventually we will have to talk about those episodes. But the Great Intelligence, before we even know how big of a character it is, really establishes itself as a major threat in this episode. Not only just controlling these powerful Yetis and the way that it works with the silver orbs, but also, even before we know fully how powerful this entity is, it's already proven to be a major threat to the Doctor. And I believe this is, technically speaking, the first time that the Intelligence makes its... No, wait, sorry. Again, because of things that happen in more modern series, the Intelligence has already been on Earth for several years, but somehow it made its way to the Himalayas. This is, again, it bothers me to no end that Stephen Moffat felt he had to change the past with Doctor Who, setting it that the Intelligence was in London, Victorian London, the whole time, and then for some reason migrated to the Himalayas, and then went back to London town. Like, there's so many issues with what Stephen Moffat tried to do with the Great Intelligence, in my opinion, and one of those casualties of those issues is this episode, where it sort of throws everything off, out of balance. But that's beside the point. We're talking about the Abominable Snowman, and not the Snowman, the other episode with the Great Intelligence. We're not talking about those episodes just yet. We're talking about this one, and like I said, it's a great threat. I love the way the Yetis look. I love the Doctor's plan to try and capture some of the Yetis. Also, one thing that I don't think gets enough credit is I love the sound effects that those little silver balls make when they're seeking their master, where they're looking for a Yeti body to inhabit and function. With the whole I love that. It's one of my favorite Doctor Who sound effects of all time. Easily recognizable, easily identifiable as the sound effect for the Yetis, and that's really the best Doctor Who sound effects. You recognize which sound effect belongs to Autons, you recognize which sound effect belongs to the Daleks, you recognize the Sabarin from their iconic sounds, you recognize the Yeti from this iconic sound. Great use of the sound effect, great set design. I love the design of the Abominable Snowman themselves, the Yeti, and I love that it's one of the rare stories in the Doctor Who classic era that actually connects to another story, which we'll get to, and it's sort of, in a way, the beginning of a trilogy of stories that tie into one another, except it's spread out across two completely different seasons. And we'll get to the second one eventually as we continue our journey through Season 5, but overall, like I said, not much to talk about this episode, unlike the previous one, The Tomb of the Saruman. Great set design, and great costume design, and really unfortunate racist undertones in this episode, and unfortunately this episode is really undermined by a lot of the things that happened in the modern series. That's all I can say about this episode at the moment, so I will bid you farewell, and talk about the next episode eventually when I get to it. So thank you for watching, and hi there! Thank you for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time!